Clay, the Acting Chief Executive of the Native Islands Men Referral Service, and Rosie Batty. Rosie, the Pride of Australia medal nominee, and someone who I'm enormously proud of, and I find her enormously inspirational. It's lovely to have you here, Rosie. Inspector Lauren Callaway and my police colleagues, it's always nice to see some blue shirts in the audience, so thanks so much for coming along, I do appreciate it. I've often made comments that significant social change does not occur without strong community and political leadership, and I've already acknowledged Fiona, but Fiona is providing this community with real leadership in the family violence space, and in her role as CEO of Domestic Violence Victoria. And Fiona, again, I salute you and your work. There are a number of people in this space that do actually keep driving me, put steel in my spine when I need it, and a little like the comment the Minister made, when Victoria Police does need a poke and a prod every now and again, Fiona's always there to give us that poke and a prod, always very nicely though. And also Minister Wooldridge, I often talk about going back to 1971 when Victoria started its attack on the road toll, and we had strong political leadership with Sir Henry Bolte. Significant change doesn't happen in our community without political leadership, and Minister Wooldridge is providing that at the moment, and I'm very, very pleased to be working with Minister Wooldridge. And again, Minister, you do drive us to be in a better place, so thank you for your leadership. The theme of tonight's forum is Pathways to Respectful Relationships, and I want to explore how we can collectively lead change to tackle one of the key social issues we face in Victoria, and that's family violence. And in particular, I just want to feed this theme through tonight's chat, is how men relate to women in our community. You've heard some of the data already, and whilst the data is important, I often worry that it's a little too clinical. It doesn't describe the pain, it doesn't describe the hurt, it doesn't describe the grief that's happening in our homes every day, every night in our state. But there is some data that I do need to share with you. 65,000 times last year, 65,000 times Victoria Police attended at a person's home in this state to take a report of family violence. Now, the Minister has already said that one death occurs in Australia every week as a result of family violence. In 2013 in our state, 29 women died, 8 children died, and 7 men died as a result of family violence. So the numbers are quite significant. It's a very, very significant problem. So we need to address this on a number of fronts. We do need to be quite systemic. The way we address it isn't a police problem alone. It isn't an education problem. It isn't a health problem. It isn't a human service problem. It's a community problem. Unless we do work together, we are never, ever going to resolve this problem. Victoria Police cannot arrest our way out of the family violence issue. It's far, far broader than that. I've said before that some men in our community hold some pretty sick attitudes towards women. I don't think that's in dispute. Attitudes of sexual entitlement and possessiveness, attitudes of supposed female inferiority. Many of those attitudes are reinforced in our workplace, subtly or overtly, and sometimes they influence the vulgar or criminal behaviour that we see by men. So let me pose this question to you. How do we change these attitudes and build pathways to respectful relationships in the Victorian community? As you think about that, in the spirit of reconciliation, I wish to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet. It is upon their ancestral lands that this building is placed. I pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. So last December, I hosted a conference at the MCG, Breaking Men's Silence. Minister Waldridge shared a stage with me, and I know there were some people in this room that were at that conference. It brought together 300 men, 300 of our community's most influential leaders, to have some tough conversations about violence against women and the attitudes that encourage such violence. And at the conclusion of that forum, the 300 of us, the 300 men, collectively vowed that we would no longer remain silent on the issue of violence against women. We made it our responsibility to speak out whenever we saw it, no matter the form. We vowed to stand up and challenge inappropriate language, sexist or demeaning comments or jokes, and inappropriate touching, groping, or worse. We knew this was happening in the workplace, in sporting clubs, the broader community, and in our homes. I've got a view that until men collectively do this, the cultural attitudes that lead to violence against women will remain a pervasive and damaging force within our community. So let me just make some observations about the workplace. Start with a story. Like a lot of young Australians, Anne was excited to get her first job, working part-time shifts at a local fast food restaurant. But pretty soon, her boss started touching her inappropriately. Anne later told an anti-discrimination tribunal, "He was my boss. I thought I had to respect him and I couldn't say, 'Hey, you can't touch me,' so I said nothing." The harassment went on for 2 years. But then, on one particular occasion, he asked her to take her top off, so she found the courage to resign. Following a 3-year legal battle, the tribunal finally found in Anne's favour. And after the hearing she said, "It was seen that people in the court understood my pain and that they believed me. It was so amazing, they believed me. It's not the money, it's not winning, it was they knew he was wrong." Now I suspect many men in this room here tonight are managers or employers of women. I'm sure many of you in the course of your careers would have seen male colleagues acting inappropriately to junior female staff. Sometimes this behaviour is brushed off as not very serious. Sometimes it's simply seen as part of a workplace culture. Women who do object to this undivided attention often have their concerns dismissed with comments like, "Live with it, this is what happens." But I say to the men in the audience, imagine if these young women were your daughters, being groped, propositioned or demeaned. Imagine how you would feel. I know I would be very, very angry. And as another victim said following a successful sexual harassment court case, "I'm a young woman standing here today simply because I said it wasn't okay. Because I said that this should never ever happen to me or to anyone else. I just wanted to be treated with respect." Every one of us in this room here tonight can learn something from these two brave women. The Australian Defence Force has come through a number of terrible sexual harassment cases involving young female soldiers in recent times. In response to one of these cases, Army Chief Lieutenant General David Morrison laid down the gauntlet to his troops in an inspiring YouTube video. He made a wonderful and insightful observation to his people when he stated, "The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept." This is a mantra that all leaders could well do to adopt in their professional, social, sporting and personal lives. We do live in a culture that endorses violence as an acceptable way to resolve conflict. And if anyone doubts that, Think back to some headlines a few months ago where two mates, James Packer and David Gingill, were involved in an incident outside Packer's Bondi apartment. You couldn't miss it, it was over all the papers. The incident was dismissed by many in the media as being trivial. Bob Catter, an experienced and long-serving politician, went so far to say it was the Australian way. If that's the Australian way for settling differences, then perhaps we need to redefine exactly what it means. I would argue that tolerance of male aggression goes to the heart of why some Australian men have an inability to deal with conflict, be it with a mate, a wife, a child, a parent, or a work colleague, without the necessity to revert to violence. The World Health Organisation recently stated the unequal position of women relative to men and normative use of violence to resolve conflict is strongly associated with partner violence. And I agree with this proposition. In my mind, the attitude of some men towards women and the inability of some men to control their anger has directly contributed to violence against women and children in our community. So how can we change it? Some look to the government for direction, some think the government should solve it for us. But I can assure you that many, including government, its agencies, the courts, Victoria Police, are working very, very hard to try and resolve these many and difficult issues. But all the reform in the world, all the investment in the world will have little impact without a fundamental change to the male culture. We must change the way some men relate to women. We must address some men's inability to resolve conflict without reverting to violence. So back to my challenge. To the men in the room, we have to start having those hard conversations with our mates, our sons, our colleagues and our teammates about changing the language, the attitude and the misogynist behaviour that lies at the heart of male violence towards women. We have to have the courage to have those conversations. We must reach out to those we believe who are perpetrating violence. There is help available. We cannot simply be bystanders. Your example will inspire others.